What if some of the biggest stars in the world are hiding in plain sight? No statements, no clear answers, just years of rumors, subtle hints, and unanswered questions. Fans think they know the truth, but do they really? Because in Hollywood, not everything is meant to be explained. Emma Watson approaches her personal life with the same thoughtful restraint that defines her public image. While she has been vocal about issues like gender equality and identity on a broader scale, she rarely zooms in on her own romantic life. It's not secrecy, it's selectivity. She seems to believe that not every part of a person needs to be publicly dissected to be valid. By avoiding labels and detailed disclosures, Watson keeps the focus on what she stands for rather than who she dates. There's a quiet strength in that decision. It suggests that identity can be expressed through values, actions, and consistency, not just through declarations. Dakota Johnson has a way of speaking that feels both candid and carefully uncommitted, like opening a door just enough to let light in, but never wide enough to reveal the whole room. She has hinted at open-minded perspectives on love and relationships, suggesting a worldview that isn't confined by traditional boundaries. Yet, she stops short of defining herself. That in-between space feels intentional, almost philosophical. Johnson seems less interested in labeling identity and more interested in experiencing it. Her approach reflects a modern sensibility, where personal truth isn't something that needs to be announced, it's something that unfolds quietly over time, shaped by moments rather than definitions. Margot Robbie stands as a visible and consistent ally to the LGBTQ+ community, using her platform to support inclusive storytelling and representation. But when the lens turns toward her own identity, she gently steps out of frame. She keeps that part of herself private, untouched by public curiosity. There's a balance in how she navigates this present, but protected. She advocates loudly for others while choosing silence for herself. That contrast feels intentional, as if she understands that visibility doesn't have to mean vulnerability. Robbie's approach shows that you can be deeply supportive without making your personal life part of the narrative. Sometimes, the strongest stance is knowing where to draw the line. Florence Pugh brings a sense of emotional openness to everything she does, whether on screen or in interviews. She speaks about love with a kind of honesty that feels unfiltered, emphasizing connection, feeling, and authenticity over rigid definitions. Yet, when it comes to labeling her own sexuality, she leaves the space intentionally undefined. That openness without conclusion feels very much in tune with her generation, a perspective where identity is fluid, evolving, and deeply personal. Pugh doesn't rush to categorize herself, nor does she seem interested in doing so. Instead, she embraces the idea that love is bigger than labels, and that understanding yourself doesn't always come with a final answer. There's something quietly liberating in that. It suggests that identity isn't a destination, it's a continuous unfolding, shaped by time, experience, and the courage to remain undefined. Kristen Stewart spent years navigating fame, like someone walking through a room full of mirrors, every angle watched, every reflection analyzed. At the peak of her Twilight era, the world tried to define her in the simplest terms possible, reducing her identity to headlines and assumptions. Yet, when it came to her sexuality, she remained deliberately out of reach, choosing silence over simplification. What makes Stewart's journey compelling isn't just that she eventually opened up, it's how she did it. There was no single moment of revelation, no neatly packaged label. Instead, she unfolded her truth gradually, speaking about fluidity and rejecting rigid definitions. Her story feels less like a coming out and more like an ongoing conversation, one that evolves as she does. In many ways, she helped shift the narrative from "what are you?" to "who are you becoming?" Cara Delevingne has always carried an energy that resists stillness, like a spark that refuses to settle into a single shape. Early in her career, she pushed back against labels, openly expressing that she didn't see identity as something fixed. That resistance placed her in a public gray area, where curiosity followed her every move and speculation filled the silence she chose to maintain. When she later spoke more openly about her fluid sexuality, it didn't feel like a conclusion, it felt like another chapter. Kara's perspective reframes identity as something alive, something that shifts with time and experience. Her openness didn't just answer questions, it challenged the need for definitive answers in the first place. For many fans, especially younger ones, that message landed deeply. You don't have to have everything figured out to be valid. Aubrey Plaza operates in a space that feels intentionally undefined, like a character who knows more than she lets on. Her approach to her personal life mirrors her on-screen presence, subtle, unpredictable, and quietly intriguing. When she mentioned being attracted to both men and women, it wasn't framed as a major announcement. It simply existed, without emphasis or follow-up. That understated moment says a lot about how Plaza views identity. She doesn't treat it as something that needs to be explained or categorized for public consumption. Instead, she allows it to exist naturally, without labels or expectations. In a culture that often demands clarity, her ambiguity feels almost rebellious. It's a reminder that identity doesn't always need a definition. It can simply be experienced. Jodie Comer's performance in Killing Eve blurred emotional and psychological boundaries so convincingly that audiences began projecting those same complexities onto her real life. The intensity of her role sparked widespread curiosity, particularly around her sexuality, as fans searched for parallels between actor and character. But Comer has remained firmly grounded in her privacy. She rarely engages with speculation, choosing instead to keep the focus on her craft rather than her personal life. That boundary feels deliberate, almost like a quiet declaration. What you see on screen is performance, not confession. In an era where public figures are often expected to share everything, Comer's restraint stands out. It reinforces the idea that an actor's talent lies in transformation, not revelation. Zendaya moves through the spotlight with a kind of quiet precision, like someone carefully curating what the world gets to see. Despite her global fame, she has consistently maintained a strong boundary around her personal life, especially when it comes to her sexuality. She doesn't deny, confirm, or elaborate, she simply chooses not to engage. That choice carries its own kind of weight. In a culture driven by constant disclosure, Zendaya's silence becomes a statement of control. She defines her narrative not by what she reveals, but by what she protects. Her focus remains on her work, her influence, and the stories she tells through her art. There's something quietly powerful in that approach. It suggests that identity doesn't always need to be public to be real, and that sometimes the strongest presence is the one that keeps a part of itself untouched by the noise. Taylor Swift's life has often felt like an open book, except for the pages she deliberately keeps sealed. Her songwriting invites listeners into deeply personal emotions, yet when it comes to defining her own identity, she maintains a careful distance. Over the years, fan theories about her sexuality have grown louder, more detailed, and sometimes even investigative in nature. Still, Swift remains intentionally elusive. She doesn't directly confirm or deny, allowing interpretations to exist without interference. That silence isn't empty, it's strategic. By leaving space between what is known and what is imagined, she turns her identity into something almost poetic, where meaning shifts depending on who's listening. In a way, she's not just telling stories, she's letting people find themselves inside them.